endless scrolling, nagging self-doubt sound familiar? What if that accusing voice isn't yours at all? For 800 years, gatekeepers buried a scandalous secret, the Gospel of Judas. Gnostic texts and Nag Hammadi revelations say Jesus shared a hidden path while the 12 were blind. If you learn this, you won't see Christianity or yourself the same. Will you open the secret account? Ancient truth shatters all modern illusions. What if the voice inside you that whispers, "You betrayed the team," or "You shouldn't have said that," is wearing someone else's uniform? In the last section, we traced how authority rewrites history. Now you discover a sharper example, a 2000-year-old story that literally turns Christianity upside down. And in doing so, it gives you a mirror for how outside power disguises itself as conscience. By the end of this short piece, you'll know why a gospel that praises Judas feels so threatening, and how that same pattern plays out in your head every day. The one big idea here is simple stories shape conscience. Think of it like this. Imagine your mind is a phone and culture is an app store. Most apps sell you security by promising rules. The Gospel of Judas is an app that installs a very different script. Judas is not the villain who betrays truth. He is the one who follows secret instruction, the only disciple given the real teaching. That flips the script. When you hear this, you begin to see how many of your shoulds come from apps you didn't choose. The ancient text preserved in a Coptic copy found among other forbidden works and linked to the Nag Hammadi library discoveries dates back in its Greek form to about the middle of the 2nd century and was already condemned by leaders like Irenaeus around 180 AD. Those reactions tell you something. An old story that honors inner knowing threatens systems built on obedience. This isn't just ancient drama. Here's what this means for you right now. If the culture around you rewards conformity and shames dissent, you learn to self-police. You doomscroll looking for cues about right behavior. You apologize before you think. You correct yourself out loud to avoid being labeled a traitor. Think of social approval as instant followers counting likes. The inner script keeps tally the same way. You feel the tightening, a small, sharp voice that makes you shrink. But when you name that voice, like identifying Judas as something other than a betrayer, you break a loop. You begin to see the difference between a genuine conscience and a borrowed command. You recognize the pattern. Authority claims divine or moral backing, you obey, and the result is less freedom, not more. You can practice this today. Notice when you say, "I'm sorry," out of habit, not choice. Notice when you silence a thought because some unnamed rule says so. Ask who benefits if I stay quiet. In the Gospel of Judas, the authorities rewrite the story to keep power in your life. The same pattern shows up as apology addiction, guilt that never ends, or constant self-editing. When you name the voice, "This is the authority voice, not mine," you stop automatic capitulation. You don't have to overthrow everyone, you just stop giving that installed script the final word. You break free a little, and you remember that your inner knowing matters. Up next, we peel back how that empire of control actually operates in plain sight. The rituals, the language, the rewards and punishments that train you to obey. You'll see the exact tools used across centuries, from councils that decided which gospels lived to modern systems that shape your private judgment. If you thought this was only about an old manuscript, you're about to realize it's about the software running your life. What if the story you trust about Judas is upside down? After our last section peeled back the polished image of early Christianity, you now discover a text that rewrites the script. Around 180 CE, Irenaeus stands up and calls the Gospel of Judas a heresy, and that act buries the book. Then a decaying Coptic manuscript resurfaces in the 1970s, sits in shadow for decades, and scholars finally confirm its authenticity in 2006. You realize a buried secret has been dragged into the light. The main idea is simple but explosive: the Gospel of Judas flips spiritual authority. Think of it like this. Imagine a boardroom where everyone hears the same speech, except one person is invited into the CEO's office for a private briefing. In this gospel, Jesus laughs at the apostles and gives Judas a private revelation. That private meeting becomes the center of truth, not the public sermon. The Codex Tchacos, preserved in Coptic and like other finds at Nag Hammadi, shows these Sethian myths where the creator is demoted and secret knowledge matters more than official rank. You begin to see how this single tweak turns the whole power structure inside out. Here, what the ancient evidence feels like when you hold it up. Irenaeus, writing in about 180 CE, rips into any gospel that suggests secret teaching for a chosen few. His attack helps erase those texts. The manuscript we call the Codex Tchacos crawls back into view in the 1970s, water-stained and incomplete. And in 2006, scholars publish a careful translation that shocks readers. Jesus isn't endorsing the 12 as the only heirs. He singles out Judas for a different role. This is why the story triggers such heat. It cuts at the heart of who gets to decide what truth is. This matters to you today more than you might think. If you accept that authority flows only from the top, you hand over your sense of truth. But when a text says the deepest revelation comes in secret, given to one unexpected person, you start to ask, who decides what counts as truth in my life? You begin to see parallels everywhere. A teacher who dismisses your questions, a media story that never shows all the documents, a faith community that tells you to trust them and not your own experience. You feel the shift when you recognize that some voices were silenced on purpose, and you sense the invitation to reclaim your own discernment. Here, that's what this means in practice. You will notice when institutions prefer simple stories to messy truths. You will question leaders who label curiosity as danger. You will feel the tension between belonging and honest inquiry. If you ignore these signals, you stay inside a neat narrative that someone else controls. If you pay attention, you break free and start to judge claims for yourself. And that changes relationships, communities, even politics. You begin to recognize a pattern. Suppression breeds certainty in the suppressors and doubt in everyone else. The Gospel of Judas is not just an odd book, it's evidence of a long fight over who gets to name the spiritual map. In the next section, we trace how that fight shaped belief for centuries, and how the same moves still shape your convictions today. You won't want to miss who benefits when truth goes underground. What if the erasure of a single book could teach you to distrust your own inner voice? If the last section pulled back the curtain on hidden leaders, this one pulls harder and shows how losing a text like the Gospel of Judas doesn't just rewrite history, it rewires you. In the coming minutes, you discover how censorship of sacred stories quietly hands your power to outsiders, and how reclaiming those pages can return authority to your gut. The idea is simple: when a story is silenced, a decision maker steps in to tell you how to think and feel. Think of it like this. You once carried a compass. That compass helped you find north. Then someone took it away and put a map in your hands that only they could read. You follow their directions because you no longer trust your own needle. The Gospel of Judas is an ancient example of that theft. In a text rediscovered in the 20th century and linked to Nag Hammadi discoveries, Jesus is shown giving secret teaching to Judas, a picture that flips the usual roles and questions who holds true insight. Scholars like Rodolphe Kasser call it a book that turns Christianity on its head. Church leaders like Irenaeus condemned and pushed it aside. The message is not just about doctrine, it's about who gets to say what knowing looks like. When leaders label inner knowing as dangerous or heretical, you learn to wait for permission, instead of trusting the quiet voice inside. This is why losing a gospel matters to you now. When you start to see this pattern, you begin to notice it in everyday life. You discover how institutions, religious or secular, old or new, can replace your discernment with rules, experts, or credentials. You feel that hesitation when you want to speak up at work, the pause before you follow your gut on a relationship, the nervousness before you act without consensus. Here, that's what this looks like in a simple modern example. Imagine you want to start a small project. Your inner sense says do it, but you wait for a manager's approval, a committee vote, or an endorsement. That waiting becomes habit. You lose practice making small sovereign choices, and with time you begin to expect external permission for anything that matters. That's the disempowerment. The Gospel of Judas, suppression models, replace direct knowledge with gatekeepers, and people stop trusting their own seeing. So what do? First, you reclaim small acts of inner authority. Start with one choice this week where you follow your gut without asking for a stamp of approval. Try a conversation, a creative move, or a personal boundary. Second, you read and listen to buried voices, not to replace reason but to retrain it. When you read texts like those found at Nag Hammadi, or learn how figures like Irenaeus fought certain stories, you practice weighing sources yourself. You realize that authority is not automatic, it's earned and tested in your own experience. Third, you build rituals that tune your inner compass, brief journaling, a 5-minute check-in before decisions, or a quick meditation. These are concrete steps that help you notice when you're slipping into permission seeking and when you're tuning into true discernment. The stakes are real. Keep waiting for permission, and your life narrows. Reclaim buried wisdom, and you widen your capacity to act, to trust, and to lead yourself. Next, we move from diagnosis to recovery. You've seen how a silenced gospel can mirror the silencing of your intuition. Up ahead, we'll explore practical practices and ancient techniques, not as exotic curiosities, but as tools you can use today to rebuild your inner authority and practice a new form of seeing. Get ready, you're about to learn how to turn that compass back on. What if the way you fight your own doubts is the very thing keeping you small? If in the last section we uncovered how the Gospel of Judas flips the old story inside out, here you learn a daily practice that turns that flipped story into something you live, not just think about. Today you discover a simple 5-step protocol drawn from that overturned world recognition breath text release service. By the time you finish this, you'll see how a few minutes each day moves ancient gnosis from dusty pages into your bones. The main idea is clear knowledge becomes power only when it's embodied. Think of it like charging a battery. You can read about electricity, but unless you plug in, nothing lights up. This practice plugs you into a lineage of hidden teachings, the same currents that flow through the Nag Hammadi codices and the Gospel of Judas, and gives you a repeatable way to light up inner freedom. Step 1. Name the accuser. When the inner critic speaks, you say aloud, Tchacos says. And then repeat whatever the voice just told you. Think of it like labeling an email spam. By naming it, you separate the message from you. The Gnostic world names these obstructing forces, archons, Tchacos, to make them visible. This is why saying the name matters. You realize the voice is not yourself, it's a script you can unlearn. Step 2. 3 slow breaths with the silent affirmation, light within, show me. Breathe in for 4, hold, breathe out for 6, 3 times. Think of it like rebooting a frozen phone. The breath clears mental fog, and the phrase turns attention inward. Gnostic teachers describe inner illumination as something you can contact directly. This tiny ritual primes that meeting. You immediately feel the space widen, and you begin to see thoughts without being swallowed by them. Step 3. Read a short Judas passage contemplatively and journal the line that unsettles you. Read slowly like tasting something bitter to understand it. Then write the single sentence that hits you hardest. Think of it like shining a flashlight into a dark room and noting the first thing the beam reveals. The Gospel of Judas and other Nag Hammadi texts were meant to provoke recognition, not blind belief. So use that sting as a guide. When you put the unsettling line on paper, you turn a vague fear into a point of study. Step 4. Release ritual. Take one borrowed belief you've written down. I must please everyone, or I'm not allowed to fail, and tear it up or burn it safely. Think of it like removing a splinter. The act is small but symbolic. You physically separate from the story that has been stuck in your flesh. Gnostic practice often uses symbolic acts to change inner alignment. After you do this, you feel lighter. The habit loses momentum because you interrupted its ritual life. Step 5. Anchor with one concrete act of service and a 20-minute digital fast. Do one small outward thing. Bring a cup of coffee to a neighbor, make a quick call to someone who's lonely, or help a coworker finish a task. Then put your phone face down and walk away for 20 minutes. Think of it as planting a seed and letting it root. Service moves insight into the world. The digital fast starves archonic triggers that feed on constant distraction. You notice how quickly your internal critic returns when you're scrolling, and how quiet it stays when you're present and serving. This routine is short, but here's what it means for you. If you practice daily, you begin to see the pattern of the accuser instead of being its hostage. You feel a small, steady calm after the breaths. You recognize the exact belief that runs your day when you journal the upsetting line. You break free of old habits when you physically release a written belief. And you remember the lesson because you turned it into action. One real-world kindness sealed by a 20-minute break from the noise. Over weeks, theory becomes experience. Life becomes your laboratory for freedom. The stakes are real. For almost 20 years, hidden teachings were buried not because they were fanciful, but because they threatened systems that depend on your silence. If you ignore practice, ideas remain words, and the accuser keeps running your show. If you commit, you start to feel the difference. You transcend automatic reactions. You recognize the architecture of your fears. You remember that wisdom is an inside job. You begin to see how a single unsettled line from Judas can be the map to your next liberation. Next, we'll take one of those unsettling Judas passages and pull it apart line by line. How to read it so it teaches you, not terrifies you, and how to turn its strange claims into practical checkpoints for the rest of your day. Get ready, you're about to learn how an ancient text becomes a daily companion. What if the man history calls the betrayer is actually the one who heard the secret? You already walked through the story we thought we knew. Now you step into the flip side. The Gospel of Judas turns that whole picture upside down. In this section, you discover how living beyond accusation changes everything, and how one small practice pulls the buried story into your life. The main idea is simple. The Gospel of Judas presents a secret teaching handed to Judas, not a simple act of treachery. Think of it like this. You have two manuals for the same machine. One manual is public, full of rules and blame. The other is hidden with the real instructions on how the machine runs. The Gospel of Judas is that hidden manual. It comes to us from Nag Hammadi, and a Greek text likely written in the mid-2nd century. This is why Irenaeus and later leaders pushed back so hard. They were protecting the public manual. When you read the secret text, you realize the public outrage is protecting an order, not the truth. Here's what this means in practice. When you live by the public manual, the accuser inside you speaks loud. You failed. You don't belong. They were right to cast you out. But when you begin to read the hidden instruction, when you study this gospel and see Jesus speaking secret wisdom to Judas, the accuser quiets. You begin to see the difference between shame handed down by institutions and the inner knowing that frees you. You feel your discernment deepen. You recognize who is speaking when fear shows up. You break free from the need to fit in just to be safe. Think of discernment like a muscle. If you never test it, it stays weak. If you practice, it grows. Start small for 7 days, read one short passage, then note the line that lands on you. Here's the concrete exercise. Open the secret account, commit for 7 days, share which line from the Gospel of Judas changed you, and invite one seeker to join you. You will notice real shifts. At work, you'll stop swallowing your voice when a crowd pushes a consensus that feels wrong. At home, you'll trust a quiet nudge instead of the shout of guilt. Online, you'll resist the mob mentality that demands public humiliation. This is your evidence, your changed choices, your steadier courage, your new circle of knowing. You begin to see yourself as more than the accusation. You feel courage take the place of fear. You recognize allies in unexpected places. You discover that being an outsider can mean you're simply on a different map. The stakes are real, stay silent, and the buried story stays buried, share and live it, and your transformation becomes proof that the story cannot be kept down for 20 years. Next, we'll follow that proof deeper. In the next episode, you'll learn how Nag Hammadi's Sophia myth completes this map and reveals the missing piece Judas points to. Subscribe and join us. Bring one seeker. Your change is the evidence the buried story can't stay buried. What if the man history calls the traitor is actually the only one who sees? You realize you probably think you know the Judas story. But now, after peeling back the last layer, you discover a gospel that flips everything. In this section, you'll see how a hidden control system, archons and a figure called saklas, uses religion to punish clear sight, and why that threat made the map vanish for nearly 20 years. The main idea grows sharper. Some texts describe a ruling force that keeps people blind. Think of archons and saklas as stage managers who lock the lights and hand out scripts, so you never question the play. Archons are the rulers named in these texts. Saklas is the archetype of misguided power that mistakes imitation for truth. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus tells Judas that he alone understands the secret teaching while the others follow saklas, an authority that blinds you to the real message. You hear this in the Nag Hammadi Whispers and in a Coptic copy dated to the mid-2nd century. This isn't just weird myth, it's a claim that seeing clearly threatens a whole system. For you, that means a direct test of where your loyalty truly lies. Why does sight get punished? It's like spotting the trick at a magic show. If you point it out, the show can't go on. For 20 years, Orthodox leaders have enforced the illusion. Call them rulers, archons, or saklas, and early bishops answered by attacking that gospel as dangerous. Around 180 AD, figures like Irenaeus called it heresy and moved to shut it down. You begin to see a pattern. When someone refuses to worship the illusion, institutions move fast to label, silence, or exile them. You can feel that pressure today when you question what you're told at work, in faith, or on social feeds. This is the same old mechanism wearing a new mask. This matters to you today. If you start to notice patterns, carefully curated stories, rituals that demand obedience, language that calls questions disloyal, you will feel pressure. You might lose friends or a job or be branded divisive. Think of whistleblowers and truth tellers who get branded troublemakers. The same dynamics play out now. Here, that's what you'll experience: first confusion, then the sting of being misunderstood, then growing clarity. You discover that seeing is lonely but also freeing. You can break free, and that moment changes your path. For you, this means You can stop swallowing surface answers and start asking who profits from the story you're told. That clarity changes how you act. When you recognize the control mechanism, you stop accepting surface answers. You test leaders, ask who profits from the story, and look for rituals that keep people passive. You begin to feel inward knowing. The same secret wisdom the Gospel of Judas claimed was shared with Judas. If you break free from the script, you don't just learn a fact, you change how you live and whom you trust. Next, we follow the cover-up. You'll want to know who decided this map had to disappear and how they buried it. Libraries, councils, even burned pages. In the next section, you'll trace the hands that controlled the narrative and discover why hiding this map was the only way they kept their stage lights on. For 20 years, the truth stayed hidden in cracks and whispers, but the search itself is opening doors. The rest is yours to uncover.